Alright, so jumping into the PowerPoint accompanied lecture for this week, talking about language and communication. What do we mean by language? So when we talk about a lot of concepts in anthropology, they are often things that we have kind of a colloquial or public understanding of, so things like gender and race. We have these kind of understood definitions of what those things are, but then the academic and anthropological definitions and understandings are often different, more complex, more intricate, and more in-depth than the just kind of basic understanding that we have as a general public. And so language is no different. So we think about language as being what I'm doing right now. I'm using my language to tell you something. But language is more than that. So really it is a symbolic system. So I'm using sounds that are, like we said, completely arbitrary to make meaning out of these sounds. So I'm using sounds to communicate meaning to you in a very specific and culturally bound way. If I was speaking a different language that originated in a different culture or was used in a different culture, I would be using my language in a different way. Not only would I be using different sounds, but let's say my body language would be different. The eloquence of the language I was using, for example, might be different. The formality would be different. So it's a symbolic system of communication. So the goal is to communicate, consisting of sounds, words, and grammar, and they have to convey meaning. So making a bunch of random sounds that don't convey any meaning and don't communicate anything, that's not really language. Okay, I can communicate non-verbally as well. And that's still symbolic. So getting thumbs up, that's a symbol. So that's still communication in a symbolic way, even if there's no verbal communication. Same thing with American Sign Language. That is communication using symbols that usually involve the hands or other parts of the body. Okay, but that is a symbol that is communicating something of meaning. Okay, and that has in itself a very specific grammar and structure that it follows. Okay, so the importance here, the important things are that there are sounds or symbols. A lot of times you'll hear the term sounds when actually we mean symbols because, like we've said, American Sign Language is a language, even though there aren't sounds involved. Okay, so there are symbols organized into words, and they follow some sort of grammar. It's systematic, and we're using it to communicate some sort of idea. Okay, so language is very rule-bound, one of the most rule-bound aspects of society. The order in which my words go is very important. If I mix them up, I could use all of the same words and it would make zero sense. Okay, and by changing the order of the words, or the order in which I say my words, I can change the type of meaning I'm conveying. So I can speak in a more formal syntax, or a less formal or type of syntax that would actually change the meaning or the feeling behind the words that I'm using. Okay, so it's very rule-bound, yet one of the least conscious aspects of society. So we don't really, we don't always know how to articulate these rules, and we aren't consciously thinking about the rules as we're speaking. Now, maybe if I'm writing a speech or I'm speaking to the president, I might think about my language more so than if I'm communicating with my mom. So it's contextual, but it's very rule-bound, but not very conscious. We're not thinking about it all the time. And then language is also very dynamic. So like other aspects of culture, it's not static, and we can see that a lot in our culture. So the emergence of slang is a really good example to show the fluidity and dynamic nature of language. And then it's also very closely related to social hierarchies. So the way we speak can indicate other things about us. And so as an example, we can think about gendered uses of language. So this is an example not only of indicating hierarchy, status, or power in a community or culture, but also an example of how cultural norms and values actually affect our language use. So if this example here, Linda, is direct in her language use, that's kind of devalued and it's seen as being harsh or aggressive, unladylike. So women are supposed to be quiet, women are supposed to be demure, we're not supposed to use very direct language. On the other hand, men or boys in American culture, obviously this is a specific example to Western or American culture. But boys are encouraged to be very direct in their language and very forthcoming, and that's valued as strength and maturity. And so not only is the way we use our language placing us on this kind of hierarchy or separating us along some lines, but also our gender norms in this specific culture are influencing the ways in which we use our language or the ways in which our language is interpreted. Okay, and so you'll hear things like women use qualifiers more, we ask questions more. So saying things like, it's 12 o'clock, right? Instead of, it's 12 o'clock. Okay, so these are differences in the way we use our language that are based on our culture and influenced by our culture. But also, it's cyclical, so the way we use our language will also influence our culture. Okay, so there's a lot that goes on with the use of language that we don't tend to think about outside of academia. And so when we're talking about language throughout the course, keep that in mind, that the definitions and ways we think about language will actually differ in the different communities or different places you're talking about it, in your personal public life and then the academic realm as well.